Hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel where we talk about stuff. I have some random thoughts. Going through my head. A lot of stuff that keeps popping up, and I want to know if I'm completely insane for thinking these things. $1 million isn't $1 million anymore. If you look at the actual inflationary charts of fiat currencies, and more so the US dollar, $1 million, like even just the ring of it, it has like this kind of fantastic jolt to it. But $1 million is not going to go as far as it went before, and it's going to do even less tomorrow and the day after. And 10 years from now, $1 million from now, this moment, will be less even worth than it currently is. We're not going to get into a whole like Bitcoin discussion. For those of you who don't know, the US dollar has lost 99% of its value to Bitcoin. The US dollar is the world reserve currency, and it lost 99% of its value to Bitcoin in a decade. Not the whole 15 years of Bitcoin being around, in a literal decade. When you think about the idea of $1 million, you kind of assume that you can do, one would assume you can do nearly anything with it. A lot of the discussions that I have with my investing friends typically has to do with putting money, obviously, into things that will make some form of passive income. So one of my friends was saying that one of his ideas was to put $1 million into this, $1 million into that, $1 million into so-and-so. And then he was also talking about $1 million into the stock market. His idea of putting $1 million into the stock market was, on average, if you're getting dividends from it, like passive income coming from actually holding the stocks, you can usually average around 4% return for your money. Of course, people will be like, I can get more. That's cool. That's fantastic. Awesome. The idea is the 4% is like the most stable ones from like the largest companies that are out there. This comes out to $40,000 per year. And I was like, that doesn't sound too. And then I was like, now, depending on where you live, $40,000 is not a lot of money. Now, think about it. Between rent, insurance, light and gas, water sometimes, if you have a car, if you need petrol, if you I assume you need to go to the grocery store, right? Groceries, if you need any kind of new clothing, that 3,000 something is already eaten up every single month. You also have to pay taxes on the money from the dividends that you're also getting as well. Then I was like, imagine if you told the average person that $1 million wasn't enough, that you still needed to do more. This is why I think we're seeing so much of a anxious disconnect in everything that's been going on within the financial world quite recently. Because for those of you who've been missing it, rich people have been buying up all the assets, not some of the assets. I think they're trying to outpace inflation so far as humanly possible, that the average person isn't really connecting with what's going on. This is why, once again, why I'm a gigantic advocate of investing, of putting money away, and of saving. Because the vast majority of people who I know, they have nothing. And I mean, it's not because of circumstances, is because of them-a-stances. It's because of them not saving, them not putting money away, them not investing, them not looking at what the stock market is, the cryptocurrency market, you name it, across the board. They just don't have any investments because of themselves. And then you sit there and you go, like, for instance, if you had $1 million and you put it into something that gave you 4% return, and every single month you were making around 3,500 or so, 3,000 something per month, and then after taxes you were getting around 2,700, 2,800 per month, probably even a little bit less. Could you sustain on that? Like, could you like literally live your best life for 2,700 a month with all the bills and stuff that you have right now? Even crazier. Here's the flip side of it. I had a friend and they were discussing like wages and stuff like that. This is like a friend who like doesn't invest and like they make pretty normal money. we were discussing like wages in parts of the states. For those of you who don't know, a lot of times you'll hear things on TV or on videos online where they're talking about like how rich New York is. People in Miami are wealthy. LA, get ready because it's expensive. And I was like, yeah, but they also don't have like the vast majority of people living in these places aren't wealthy. Like the everyday normal person, which is 80 to 90% of the people living in these places, they don't have these extravagant jobs. And even more, here's the weird part. There was this thing where they were talking about that a lot of people in America are only making $25,000 per year. And that struck a chord because I was like, you still pay taxes on that. And I don't know of many places where you could rent a 1-bedroom to comfortably live under $1,000 something at all, and then still have all the things that you also need to pay. The same side that we're still on. If it takes $1 million to make 40,000 in passive income, if you flip it around, imagine someone who's making 40,000 a year working for a company. This would essentially mean that your output, the job that you're doing, would have made that company also $1 million. Like a lot of times, if you hear from these companies that they're making like record profits, or they make 3 something, 4 something billion dollars in extra profits, and like the CEOs, they get like a $28 million bonus. It's really weird to think about that the average person is literally breaking their back doing as much as possible for these companies who also aren't giving them. And listen, when you talk about profit, I'm not expecting these companies to be giving anybody back like an equivalent amount of money that they also like expelled to be able to so-and-so. But then the stagnation of wages. If you get a chance, find the chart on the stagnation of wages. I mean, across the world, not even just within the US. But it hasn't really moved since the 1980s. People who were making... So there was this thing that I was watching, and they were talking to these people and trying to like make them boomers. It was a very like weird thing, but I've seen a lot of videos like this. They were discussing with the older people how much they paid for their homes. And they were like, well, I paid $35,000. And one woman was like, I paid $15,000. This guy had like a little shack somewhere. He paid $6,000 in like 1981. And the discussion was from the side of the older people, well, younger people just need to work more and then they'll be able to afford a home. And then the younger people were like, well, the problem is inflation. And I was like, well, there's also another problem that no one's talking about. Since the 1980s, wages have not actually really increased. Any increase that you've seen has just been to keep up with inflation, and the companies also knew that as well. If you like, even if you look at you or yours or your friends, start asking around. When people get raises, a lot of the time the assumption is not only like, am I doing a good job here, that they're going to like reward me for it, but it's that, well, you know, I have to make more money year on year, just the way that things go. If you look at even during the last couple of years, I knew a lot of friends who were getting like raises and stuff like that. And the raises were just to keep up with exactly where inflation was. It's insane to think about, because you then realize that you are just completely trending. Look up a chart of wage stagnation around the world, and I'm sure you'll find a lot of charts for the US and stuff like that. It's very fascinating to see that, of course, people can't really keep up. It's because the companies know that the minimum that they have to do is make sure that they're giving you extra on top so that you're complacent and that you feel okay. But of course, people can't afford their rent. Of course, people can't afford these other things that they were affording 10, 15, 20 years ago. And the companies also know that. And then you have all these wealthy people who are buying up so many assets. You don't understand. I mean, maybe you've seen it here before on the channel. We've spoken about it either here or on the other channel. Rich people are buying up everything because the people who benefit the most, for those of you who don't know, the people who benefit the most from inflation are people with assets. because assets tend to always outpace inflation. This is why a lot of times, if you ever have heard, like in the art market, you'll hear art typically tends to do around typically 12 to 19% returns per year on like the previous year. Same exact thing with the stock market. Like we're constantly outpacing inflation. Same exact thing with the cryptocurrency market. It's people who actually have the assets, but then the people who don't have the assets, how can they get the assets? If they don't have enough money, there's not enough money coming in. They're not getting a proper raise. Like from the last couple of years, if we can be completely realistic about it, how many of you have gone to the supermarket and you saw, you saw on TV that inflation was up by 4.1%, but everything you bought doubled in price? Like doubled completely in price. Your rent went up, everything else went up. Logically, in the last 4 years, everyone's paycheck should have gone up by around 15 to 20% per year. And then you sit there and go, well, that's ludicrous. Whoa. Well, most people have been paying 10, 15% more year on year for their rent as well. Gas has gone up. Electricity has gone up. Water costs a lot more than it did a couple of years ago. Housing is more expensive. So is insurance. So if inflation was just 4%, you should have then at least gotten a 4% raise just to keep up with inflation. But you need to be a little bit further than that because everything else is also inflating far more than just the 4%. So 15 to 20% year on year would have made a lot more sense. But then the problem is a lot of these companies are just, how do I say this? You might have noticed recently on the newses, a lot of companies are laying off people, and it's because the companies aren't making enough money comparative to what their shareholders want. So they have to fire people literally to make the shareholders complacent, and then normal people end up getting thrown under the bus explicitly for that reason. To be able to say, well, we cut a couple of jobs. Now we have this extra money coming in that no longer has to go out to someone else. So when people, I don't know if we're going to get into that conversation, but I saw people arguing on Twitter. I saw people arguing on Twitter that people don't deserve $15 an hour for their job. That the idea of $17.50 or $20 an hour for like a normal job is absolutely ludicrous. I try to float around to see the discussions that people are having. But I wrote something this time and I said, what exactly makes you think that someone working at a job or a company that you don't own, you don't control, that you've never been to, that they don't deserve that amount of money? Have any of you ever worked in hospitality or worked in like a clothing store or something like that? When I was younger, I can't say the name of the company, but anyway, I worked for one of those companies that had like the little logo on the lapel right here, one of the little animals, you can guess. And I remember the way that people treat staff, I deserved at least a good $28.95 an hour. I think I was making $6.50 or something like, I'm pretty sure it was $6.50 back then. The way that people talk to you when they find out that you work there, you're simply beneath them. I'm here to spend money. The customer's always right, like that kind of thing. And this discussion was around fast food. People in the comment section were saying, well, it's your choice that you work at McDonald's. It's your fault that you work at Burger King. I think anyone with a conscience or a brain knows that no one on this planet has ever said my career path is going to be McDonald's. I knew a lot of people. So I went to university for 1 year and then did stop going because I knew it was not for me. Like it literally was not it. A lot of my friends stuck with it, went for 4 years and ended up anywhere 150 to 200,000 in debt, like proper like debt that they are never going to pay off. They started sending out CVs, resumes. And I mean, one company was getting back to them and they had, some of them had like 6 or 7 interviews for these jobs. I remember just having like 1 or 2 interviews. They had multiple interviews and then they were still rejected from it. So I had a friend, he didn't have a job for like a year and a half. He was at hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of resumes and CVs trying to get anyone to respond back. And at one point I spoke to him because he had moved back in with his parents. And I was like, dude, go work at McDonald's. And he was so angry with me. He was so angry at the audacity that I was telling him to lower himself. And I was like, what else are you going to do? Work there for 6 months until you find something else. And he was angry, started screaming. I knew he was projecting his situation and stuff like that. But this idea that it's so beneath I don't want to flip burgers. I don't want to give people fries. What are you talking about? And then the mindset of that anyone who does it is lower than, and that they simply don't deserve extra money. This also is probably a projection from a lot of people who are also working terrible jobs themselves. They're not getting raises, and this idea that I'm better than you because I'm making more money than you, or I have a certain position in a job. Maybe it probably is just human nature, but it's still absolutely insane to think like I make more numbers than you on a screen, and therefore I am superior to you in any sort of way. If you go through the actual numbers, if I remember the charts correctly, minimum wage in the United States, I think should be almost $40 at this point from the 1980s. Nearly $40 to be able to actually live properly and not just sustain, not live paycheck to paycheck, to live a proper life. You have enough money to save, you have enough money to invest. When you look at, and a lot of times, when you look at the actual numbers of what the average person is making in the US and also many other places, we're not going to even get into the other places that also have a worse off economy. People can't save. People can't put money away. People don't have the extra money to invest. Remember that thing before? It's a really, really popular number people have been quoting for years. What was it? If you ask I think it's nearly 50% of Americans, if you ask them if they have an extra $1,000 for like an emergency or something like that, they don't have it. And then you sit there and you wonder and you're like, well, that's people don't have $1,000. I mean, listen, people do overspend. It's very, 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 very consumerist society. But then you also think, wait, a lot of other people like can't save. They don't have money for an emergency. They have money for absolutely nothing. They literally can't pay a lot of their other bills that they have. And it's like this loop that it's crazy. You think of the idea of $1 million not being enough. It's weird. It's insanely odd. Yeah, sorry. Anyway, like I said, it's going to be like I said, just a little random thoughts video. I have this stuff going through my head all the time. I think of numbers. I think of the situation of people around me, people not saving, people saving. This inherent like desperation. I saw a video of these people talking about not being able to own a home and how it was the American dream. And I was like, no, that's also fabricated. That's something that someone made up in the 1950s to make everyone believe that they were on the same leveled playing field. And then now people still have this idea of like, no, it's so weird. Like the world is so odd. It's so odd right now. And to see this consolidation of wealth that's been taking place since the 1970s. You can feel the crunch now. You can feel how different the world is. I feel how different the world is compared to 2008. Tons of other people must be feeling this. This is why listen, if you can, please save, please invest, please put money away, because it's not going to get any better. If property prices, there was a video of property in Australia. I think it was in 1950s and 1960s. Try and find it. It's like an old timey video where this newscaster is like interviewing people outside of these like the homes like where they're being built. And they're talking to one of the couples. Oh gosh, what was it? And they were like, oh, did you just buy a home? And the guy was like, no, they're a bit too expensive. They're like, how much were the homes? I think one of the homes was like $2,500. And he's like, I think we can find better somewhere else. And during the rest of the video, they went back to that exact same place, like now, in the now times. These homes are worth $1.5 million, $2.7 million. And like the idea of not buying it at 2,000 something is like absolutely absurd. It's like, what were these people thinking? But a lot of people don't have this like forward thinking. I don't know. Yeah. That's my random thought. A million's not a million anymore. Things seem to be getting worse. Please invest if you can, or just do something. You gotta put money away in some sort of way, because the only people making money and maintaining and making more money are the people with the assets. Yeah. I do hope you enjoyed. I don't know. Hope you got something from the video. Hope you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever you might be. I hope it's absolutely fantastic. Nose is itching. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking, commenting, and supporting. And I will most certainly be talking to you all soon. See you.